Good day, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Duel Ortiz, and it's so nice to see such a ready audience to be in attendance to review a training as this, as power and relationships. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm very privileged, and we can definitely talk afterwards if you have any questions about this particular presentation. But I hope that you find it educational, and I hope that it will help you really get the wheels going in being able to use your power for good and be able to build relationships. So our topic outline looks like this. So we're going to go over the problem, what is power, the use of power in relationships, authenticity in relationships, effectively communicating expectations, healthy conflict management, effective negotiation, and biblical integration. So the problem, as a training consultant, I was asked to be here to provide some insight on topics of power and relationships with you guys. I know you're a faith-based organization, and this request comes, and I guess that's probably the good starting place, is why am I here? And I know that you've had some challenges, and the leaders here are trying to find ways to improve the company retention, reduce ethical violations that have impacted the company brand in recent months. We know that communication has been out. And to add insult to injury, the big box retailers have continued to eat up a lot of the market share. So it's become hyper competitive, which means Holy Grail has had to lower prices, cut hours for thousands of employees. And as such, morale has been very low, which is causing more conflicts, turnover, and leaders left having to pick up the lost work hours of salaried employees. And of course, that in turn is leading to problems with executive power and conflict management. So this is how, obviously, a training like this is not necessarily going to resolve the problem. But again, it's really to start thinking through how we can play a vital part together to really be in the front of this and try to improve on some of the challenges that we've had. So again, I'm very gracious. Everyone's been kind and generous to allow me to be here today. So thank you all again. So what is power? Power is a fairly ambiguous term because it has different meanings in different contexts. And we use it in common parlance since it has a wide range of meanings. But the word power actually comes from the Latin word potere, which means to be able. But things or people with power are much more than able, right? So they're able to exert a lot of force, hold authority, and refer to people who exert influence without necessarily being in charge. And that's a citation from vocabulary.com. And poder, actually in Spanish too, it's poder. And poder in Portuguese is also poderoso. And that meaning actually, it's less ambiguous perhaps in other languages like in Spanish, where that power is actually used to reference God more than it is, for example, energy and let's say the electricity goes out. So just to give you some context of the idea of power, because I know it has some various different meanings on how it's used today. So these are the 5 power bases. We have coercive power, which is based on penalties, punishments such as expensive cuts, staff reductions, verbal warnings, and student suspensions. We have reward power, which relies on being able to deliver something of value to others, whether it's tangible or intangible. We have legitimate power, which resides in the position. So those who've been mandated in those positions of authority, such as a manager, a police judge, the president, they have particular rights within their control because of their position. We have expert power, which is independent of position, but takes into account knowledge, skills, and education, which all help build influence by possessing this valuable information. And then you have referent power, which rests on the admiration that an individual has for another. So that's obviously the role model, and it has long-term benefits versus maybe some of these other ones. So referent, expert are particular ones that come to mind in terms of being valuable power bases as compared to some of the other ones. So the use of power in relationships. If politics is inevitable in organizations, which I really believe they are, then play positively. Use power to serve the vision and collaborate to build trust. You want to become the role model for ethical standards, and you want to give power away, although that doesn't necessarily sound something that is common or something that you even feel any kind of impetus to do. But there's a lot of benefits that we'll kind of talk about. But the 4 skills for influencing power in relationships is social astuteness, which is skilled at observing and interacting within social situations. You have interpersonal influence, which can adapt behaviors to specific environments. You have networking ability, which is the ability to make friends, form alliances, good negotiators. And then you have apparent sincerity, which those who possess apparent sincerity are skilled in sincerity and trust. So the use of power in relationships, to kind of talk back, to kind of rewind a little bit and talk about why we would give power away. And, well, we give power to build relationships, to increase performance and boost the bottom line. The research is clear on these particular, what would you say, some of the benefits from being able to give power away to others. And by doing so, you gain more in return. And I think a good Bible verse that references the idea is Acts 20:35, which, in everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work we must help the weak. As the Lord Jesus himself said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. And I think the Judeo-Christian worldview is unique in that God gives away his power through his Holy Spirit. I don't know that there's another worldview out there, at least not the most popular worldviews, where God or their theistic views gives power to the individual as the Judeo-Christian worldview does. Leadership is grounded in a relationship with an us mentality, and therefore is neither a glory seeker nor a self-aggrandizer. Citation there from Jones and York. Referent power will yield the greatest results in relationships long term, and reward power can be effective as long as the relationship is clear between performance and rewards, but usually it's associated with short-term results. So authenticity in relationships, creating frames. These are mental pictures or interpretations that shape understanding of reality, and they're tied to organizational codes and values. Success or failure can often rest on others to adopt a particular frame. Proactive tactics. You want to influence tactics that are employed to achieve particular objectives. And here, this is kind of a long, kind of a laundry list here of different tactics, proactive tactics that can be used in building some of that, building those relationships and being authentic. And this is rational persuasion, having to do with facts, logic, evidence. Apprising, which is compliance with request, which will result in a benefit. Inspirational appeals, creating enthusiasm to express values. Consultation, which is soliciting support in order for improvement. You have collaboration, providing resources if the target accepts and initiates the demands. Ingratiation, generating positive feelings through the use of flattery and praise. Personal appeals, appealing to the emotions of friendship and loyalty. Exchange, in return for compliance, the target is provided with some benefit. Coalition tactics, using group influence in order to convince the target to comply. And then you have legitimatizing tactics, which are claiming the right to authority or making requests. So you might think that some are better than others in some of these particular tactics, but depending on the context, one or two may be better than certain ones that you might think that could work in all case scenarios. So one that I think that's kind of interesting is using flattery and praise. Now, in most cases, we probably believe that may not be the best approach in terms of building relationships, but it's not like a particular individual would not gain any benefit from it. So these are just some tactics, proactive tactics, that I think could really something to look at and just kind of identify with to see where you are and the way you approach particular scenarios. So authenticity relationships continued. You have impression management tactics, which are known to build positive relationships. They're effective for decision making and enhancing personal image within an organization. Impression management is also prone to abuse and can lead to negative politics. It serves many useful purposes through, and it can be exaggerated from projecting an image that is consistent with the truth or for manipulation and deception. While lying can have benefit utility, it is always right to tell the truth. So conditions within organizations should be set so truth is rewarded and lies are met with appropriate influence tactics, and properly manage emotional labor as it affects employees in achieving organizational norms and goals. So this is a citation from Ashworth and Humphrey, who proposed that emotional labor should be positively associated with task effectiveness, provided that client perceives the expression as sincere. So effectively communicating expectations. The Pygmalion effect is a phenomenon whereby expectations of a target have an effect on the target's performance, also referenced as self-fulfilling prophecies. This effect can have positive or negative outcome as dependent on how expectations are communicated. As such, keep expectations high and appeal to the value and potential of employees. So communicate more effectively through these particular channels. You have climate, input, output, and feedback. And again, these are just some terms taken from the text, from the Johnson text, that really go into, and there's obviously more that can be taken from here, but we want to be able to communicate effectively, and really assuming high expectations as we interact with our individuals and groups will go a long way. And then there's a lot of research behind that to show that this Pygmalion effect is quite, well, it's first off, it's a phenomenon. It's very fascinating, but that's something to think about too as we approach in our leadership roles across the board, and on how we treat each other and how are we communicating in terms of expectations. So healthy conflict management. So managers estimate that they spend between 20 and 40% of their time dealing with disagreements. And so you can't avoid conflict. It's not just likely, it's inevitable, but it can be managed. And manage emotions, you can do so by cooling down, slow down, engaging constructively. Identify your conflict style and employ others when appropriate. You have different conflict styles, and you might be able to, there might be one that's a little bit more, that you might possess one more than the other. And, and again, these might be appropriate in one context, but maybe not so much in another. So this is good to identify kind of where you're at with your style, and maybe those that you interact with commonly, I mean, even on a personal level, not just within the organization. It's something that I think it's good worth reviewing. There's different assessments throughout the particular text, and of course you could probably go online and there's a lot of information, a lot of research that you can dig up on conflict style. And here are some of the ones that were just taken from the text. You have avoiding style, which is keeping distance or in order to engage in conflict. So it's kind of between the fight and flight, it's more of the flight response instead of fighting. So accommodating style, which demonstrates low concern for self, but higher concern for others. You have compromising, which is a moderate concern for self and others in order to come to a solution. So you're more focused on the solution than you are on trying to moderate the concern between each other. Competing style shows little concern for other, but places high concern for the self. And then you have collaborative, which is the high degree of focus for both self and others with the goal of a win-win solution. So not all disagreements are unethical. So managers need to recognize the difference between functional and dysfunctional conflicts. You have functional, which is the content of messages, ideas, values, process, budgets, etc. And you have dysfunctional, which are conflicts focused on personalities and emotions that are involved. Healthy conflict management. Be aware of your behaviors and set guidelines for conflict management. Identify common goals and interests, and you want to focus on win-win solutions. Do not lean on authority or get wrapped up in defending general statements. Ask questions or to try to better understand the position of others. Acknowledge and find points of agreement. Emphasize conditions for when you would agree with an opposing viewpoint. And conflicts can be managed by apologizing, expressing remorse, or offering forgiveness. So sometimes these are just really good examples, I believe, that help in conflict management, because if your position is one that's opposing, it's going to be hard to come to any kind of solution if it's just a competing argument. It's a zero-sum game. You really want to, as you're managing conflict, just try to find points of agreement instead of just disagreement, because anytime you're having a conflict management, obviously there's a conflict. There's something that you have to battle out and come to a consensus, although that can be very difficult if you don't practice or utilize some of these bullet points. But you also got to be self-aware of your behaviors. You really have to look at where you can learn a little bit more and understand where someone else's position is coming from, because they might be able to teach you something that you don't know, and you may not have all your facts straight. And obviously, going into these meetings, you want to have those facts. You want to have those evidence and those things that we talked about. But apologizing goes a long way. Being remorseful, showing empathy, offering forgiveness where necessary, asking for forgiveness if you're the one that maybe lashed out, or you're even in that conflict to begin with. Those are I believe are very good ideas when it comes to healthy conflict management. So here's a verse from Colossians 3:13. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. So effective negotiation. Negotiation is the decision-making process by which two or more people ask to reach an agreement on the exchange or distribution of benefits, burdens, roles, or responsibilities. So an integrative approach should be employed since it is a joint process for problem solving. And of course, integrative would be the ideal over the other one that was talked about in the text is distributive approach. And we'll kind of talk about that here in a minute. So separate people from the problem. You want to focus on interests and not positions. Invest options for mutual gain. Insist on objective criteria. And when negotiating, you'll encounter three types of ethical issues. You have choice of tactics, distribution of benefits, and the impact of the settlement on outsiders. Here's some biblical examples of distributive bargaining. So when it comes to distributive approach, this is kind of a win-lose situation here. So David negotiates with Uriah the Hittite after sleeping with Bathsheba, as referenced in 2 Samuel 11. Uriah says to David, the ark and Israel and Judah are dwelling in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. And of course, we know there was deceptive and behind the scenes of how David could pretty much cover up for sleeping up with Bathsheba, who was the wife of Uriah. Another one is Esau, who gives away his birthright, as referenced in Genesis 25:30-32. Esau says to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." Jacob replies, "First sell me your birthright. Look, I'm about to die," Esau says. "What good is the birthright to me?" Again, a win-lose situation in this particular approach of how conflict. We know that Esau gives away his birthright, but also Jacob kind of helped facilitate that, and because it goes on to say that, swear to me that he would basically do so. And he took advantage of an opportunity that had no benefit to Jacob at all, other than the immediate, the short term of being able to satisfy his hunger. Here's a biblical example. Here's some biblical examples of integrative approach. So in contrast to what we talked about of the distributive, this is where this one is focused on the win-win. So Christ negotiates the new covenant. And this is, I think, is a good example from Hebrews 8 and 8:6. And it says, the ministry Jesus has received is a superior to theirs, as the covenant of which he is mediator is superior to the old one, since the new covenant is established on better promises. So although it may not be completely direct, I feel like there is an indirect utility in terms of integrative approach and negotiation in this. So Jesus negotiated this new covenant, although it doesn't necessarily directly mean that, but he mediated this to fulfill the old law into this new covenant that he established for his people. So Moses here is another example where he sought favor of the Lord, as referenced in Exodus 32:11 and 14. But Moses sought the favor of the Lord. Lord, he said, why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and mighty hand? Then the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster threatened. So that's a fascinating one too, because again, there's some negotiation there when God was about to do something, when he was going to completely wipe out a particular people or nation, and Moses was able to negotiate with God and wrestle with God, as the word Israel means, to wrestle. So there seems to be something where there are times where in the Bible, and really even in our lives, where we can wrestle with God, and though God may have a plan, we can actually be able to negotiate with him if something that we desire greatly can come to fruition. So these are our references, and that's the end of our presentation. So thank you all for being here to go over this power relationships theme, and I want to thank you for your time.